Lo, thanks for joining. We're going to give it a minute for everyone to get into the room before we kick off our demo today. So just hold tight for a couple minutes and we'll get started. If if you're just joining us, we're just waiting for the room to fill in before we kick off things. So just give me a little more time. All right, great. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining today's demonstration, Transform Document Workflow with Intelligent Document Processing. I'm your host, Jamie Carlson, Director of Integrated Campaigns here at Automation Anywhere, and I'm thrilled to have you with us today. Today, we're going to show you how you can turn your document management challenges into opportunities for greater efficiency and accuracy using AI. Generative AI uplevels the capabilities of document automation in ways previously thought impossible. It can help your finance teams automate invoice processing and financial reporting. It can help your supply chain teams streamline management of purchase orders, delivery receipts, and inventory logs. And it can help your legal teams get help managing contracts, legal briefs, and compliance documents. But that's only the beginning. And now with vision powered generative AI extraction, you can automate the processing of documents with even more complex structures. But before we dive into the session, I do have a few housekeeping items to share. First, all lines are muted and will remain so for the duration of the event. Today's webinar is only recorded for training purposes and will not be shared. Please use the Q&A button to ask your questions. We'll have some time after the demo to answer them, and the chat button is available if you need to reach out with audio or video issues. We do want to call out our safe harbor declaration. We may make some forward-looking statements during today's demo. Please just make sure you're making your purchasing decisions based on the currently available product. With that, let's get into showing you how AI-powered document automation solutions work in practice. Our expert, Benjamin Walker, is here to take you on that journey. Ben is a senior solutions architect here at Automation Anywhere and has extensive expertise in the different ways AI-powered document automation can transform your document workflows. Ben, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jamie. Very much looking forward to this session as well. There's a lot of new updates to cover today, so it's a very exciting one. And thank you everyone for taking the time to join. The flow of today, we'll go through a few slides, just kind of covering some of the latest innovations within the platform, as well as some contextual shifts that we've seen in the market. And then we'll spend a good bit of today in the demonstration where we'll cover a couple different use cases, actually build a learning instance and deploy it together, and see some of the different adaptability within document automation. Now, to start, we just wanted to give kind of a history of intelligent document processing. Originally, any extraction of data off of documents always stemmed from fixed formats. You were using OCR, you had to train a specific format, and then you were able to get data off of that form. Things like W-2 statements, I-9s, anything that is fixed, and there are no permutations from a templating perspective. The second generation brought about some machine learning aspects, and this is when we were able to do semi-structured documents such as invoices and purchase orders. And this was pretty much the entire document processing market up until about 2.5, 3 years ago. You were able to extract data off these semi-structured documents. However, there was a lot of manual effort involved with training new templates, new permutations of layouts, things of that nature, and it wasn't necessarily a fully intelligent system. It was more so training some ML, OCR in order to extract data off of those types of documents. Today, where we find ourselves is leveraging generative AI plus automation to completely unlock a whole new realm of documents. In addition to being able to tackle different document types, things like unstructured documents, in addition to semi-structured documents, the other thing I'd like you to think about is the how. As we cover the demonstration today on document automation, there's a lot of different ways to get to an end goal. If you think about driving a car across country or on a road trip, if you're using a car with, a paper map, a compass, maybe a smaller tank of gas, so you have to stop frequently, that's a lot different than driving a modern car with Android or Apple CarPlay and having a GPS that will route you through the entire journey, right? document automation can not only extract information from these challenging documents, but it does it in a very seamless, easy to use way. It's built to be very intuitive. So I do see the how just as important as the what in terms of capabilities, because it is a very seamless platform, as you'll see in the demonstration, and it is able to facilitate all steps of that workflow. Going forward, we've talked a little bit about document automation at a high level. Just wanted to call out it is and has been GA for quite some time. We have a plethora of customers on it today, leveraging the latest generative AI capabilities, which we'll talk about in more detail as we go on. Now, from a visual perspective, and we talked about this being a journey, there's a lot more to document processing than just extracting data off of a PDF or off of an image. There's what happens before that extraction occurs, so upstream activities, such as getting documents from an email server or from a SharePoint, orienting the documents, cleaning up resolutions, doing file type conversions, all of those things which we would consider pre-processing must take place because you want to send good data, as clean data as possible to the extraction model. If it's blurry or oriented the wrong way, or even from a classification aspect, if you're sending an invoice to a legal contract model, the extraction is not going to be very good, right? So there's a suite of capabilities within the platform to help with these upstream activities, document classification, splitting, image enhancements, all of these things are provided out of the box within the platform. And then obviously, once the data is prepared in the best structure that it needs to be, there's the extraction piece, which document automation is using generative AI to actually pull data off the document. Any exceptions are handled in the automation copilot. So with technology, we all know nothing is ever 100%, 100% of the time. Things can have ink marks on them, smudges, someone maybe spilled coffee before they faxed a document over that needs to be extracted. Any of those exceptions will automatically be routed to a human for intervention. And this is pretty much how we maintain quality and integrity in this end-to-end process. And then lastly, once the data is extracted, whether it needed validation or did not, it is processed in its downstream system. Now, document automation sitting within the broader automation platform of Automation Anywhere, this chain of events is extremely seamless. There's packages already in the control room and automations that can do a lot of the pre-processing and post-processing. And then the extraction piece pretty much sits in the middle here to actually pull data off of the documents. Going forward, just to show you some brief examples, this is what we kind of mean when we talk about pre-processing or enhancing image quality. If you look on the invoice on the left, you can see its orientation is shifted, it's very blurry. There's a suite of mechanisms within the automations itself, packages for pre-processing that can significantly clean this up, which is just going to increase your accuracy rate from an extraction perspective. Additionally, when we talk about managing these documents, one of the biggest things that we hear from our customers is, okay, I have one email box and we get 5 different documents, or I have a 40-page document and I only really care about 3 pages within it and need to extract data off of those 3 pages. How do we do that intelligently and at scale? The classification piece is an integral component of the solution. There is the ability to classify documents as a whole and also classify pages within a document. And all of this happens before document automation is ever called. So I would absolutely say the image enhancements as well as the classification steps are paramount within this workflow. A lot of effort today is not only spent on just reading a document and typing it into a system, but also classifying documents. That's a major pain point that we've heard across our customers. The other thing to note, as we've mentioned, document automation can now work with any type of document, and the training is extremely seamless. We'll see that when we build one model together. And then, as you know, with the automation capabilities of the platform today, it can route these documents, upload them to SAP, other systems, do checks and database lookups to do 3-way matching. All of those capabilities are within the platform. Now let's talk about generative AI as well as a very exciting announcement that we have with our latest release, dot 35, which has come out in just this past month. So previously, when we did extraction with our former technology IQ bot, everything was OCR and template based. You could extract data off semi-structured documents, but oftentimes scaling it would be extremely manual. With generative AI, this completely changes the process. It goes from more of a prompt-based approach of data extraction as opposed to a template or layout-based approach. In our first release of generative AI, which was probably over a year ago at this point, it was focused on text. So we would extract the data from the document using prompts to essentially query text off the document and get responses back for the values which we wanted to fetch. But with our latest innovation, we now have vision-powered generative AI extraction. So as you may know, the generative AI models have significantly improved. I see some claps going on, and I absolutely agree with you. Vision is a complete game changer in the generative AI world. The capabilities of these models is growing at a rapid rate, and we are embedding the latest and greatest into our document automation suite. So in addition to textual generative AI-based extraction, we're now able to visually look at documents like a human and extract the data accordingly. This is seamlessly built into the platform. You do not have to do any custom integrations, trainings, or machine learning, things of that nature. It is in the platform today and ready to use. And it's also a purpose-built solution. We heard from customers that one of the biggest challenges was table extraction. You have complex tables. It's hard to discern which column maps to which field. You have hundreds of different providers submitting these invoices or other documents with tables. This is a massive innovation to improve tabular extraction as well as other extractions from a diverse set of documents. So we'll see a lot of this within the demonstration today. The other thing to call out is checkboxes. Is a signature on a document, is it signed or not? All of those types of scenarios are much, much improved with the integration of the vision models in generative AI. Next, we'll talk a little bit about a experience, both from a developer point of view, and then also from a business user point of view. In this example, we'll focus on the business user. What we wanted to do was, for those exceptions which we mentioned, anytime a human needs to be involved, we wanted to make that process extremely seamless. Essentially drop document automation into whatever system of record that individual lives in today. If they do most of their work in Salesforce, give them the ability to process documents, validate documents directly in the Salesforce interface. We're essentially powering document automation via the automation copilot of Automation Anywhere to do just this. It provides a single interface for teams. It's all managed by role-based access controls. So it's governed. You're only able to see which workflows or which document types that you're able to be worked with. And also it is agnostic. So it can drop into virtually any modern application. If you can access it via a browser, very likely chance we can embed Automation Copilot and you could do document validation as well as other automation activities. The other experience piece which we wanted to focus on in document automation is the development aspect. We really wanted to make this easy and intuitive so it does not require a complex skill set, someone with a deep background in document processing or OCR or computer vision. We want to make this extremely business centric. So it's directly available within the control room. It automatically creates a workflow under the hood. So when we go and create one together today, we'll see what that process looks like and what it generates for us automatically. And the last thing is it's built so that there's no additional integration or configurations needed. When we're using generative AI and vision models and things of that nature to do extraction, it's not asking you for a lot of API credentials and setup and you having to go to another system and do a lot of things. It's all out of the box, leverageable for you today. And then the last slide, I alluded to this previously, the workflow that is created under the hood for us. It's automatically developed for you, but it is very customizable. If your workflow has specific needs like matching or fetching values via API, or maybe doing an extraction with one model and then contrasting it to another, all of those capabilities are there for you today, as well as customizing any approval flows or cross-team communication. So this workflow also within the automation copilot realm is out of the box. It's auto created, and then from there you can customize it as you need. So with that, we'll hop into the platform and we'll walk through a couple different demonstrations. We'll also end this session so that we have time for live question and answer. But while we go, feel free to drop any questions into the Q&A, and we will answer as many as we can as we go. So with that, I will jump over into my control room and we will walk through some examples. So this is where we can access document automation. You could see here in the control room, I'm on the home page, and then under this AI section, this is where I can access all of the broad AI solutions within the platform, one of which is document automation. And I do see a question in the chat. There are analytic capabilities for the extracted data. Essentially, when the data is extracted, you have two options. You can write it to a CSV or keep it as a JSON. Once that data is extracted via JSON or via CSV, you could also flag variables for reporting purposes, or if you want to do any custom analytics, you can have automations run over that structured data and create any custom analytics dashboards, et cetera, that you need. Now that I'm within document automation, let's go ahead and create a learning instance. We can see there's a lot of learning instances here already, almost 650 of them, but let's create a new one and walk through a live example. When I click create a learning instance, you'll see it's a very intuitive process. I can give this learning instance a name, I'll give it my name, and then I'll give it a sale of goods contract, and I can specify some other controls here. I can specify what type of document it is that I need to extract data from. I can designate the language, the provider, the OCR, and even to the granularity of which generative AI model I want to use for data extraction. Now, before we go any further and create the model for this example, let's take a look at the document. This is a sample legal contract for the sale of goods. You can see there's some information embedded within text here, such as a date in which this contract is effective. Also, there's an address in here. There's some scopes. We have a table here with payment terms around product. And we also have a table here with supplier name, as well as some other text fields. In this example today, what I'm going to want to do is I want to capture two fields from this document. I want to capture the effective date and the delivery address, and then I want to capture both tables that are in this document. So if I go back to my learning instance, I'm going to choose the document type as unstructured. Since it's a legal contract, there isn't really much structure to it. I'm going to use Google Vision as my OCR provider, and I'll leave it at OpenAI for my generative AI model. Now in the next section, this is where I can create the forms which I want to extract data from. If you noticed previously when I chose different document types, there were some models that said pre-trained, like invoices was a pre-trained model, for example. What that means is we've trained models for invoices. We already know which fields you're likely going to need. We also know aliases for those fields, data types. We've already put some machine learning on the back end to make the model more sophisticated with extraction. So it means it's kind of already started for you, maybe 30%, maybe 50% of the way there, and then you can configure the rest, right? When I chose unstructured, this is essentially a document that we've never seen before. So I'll go ahead and start adding fields here. I'll add another one. And then from here, another thing I can do is I could add rules for this information as well. In previous solutions, rules were extremely complex. What we wanted to do was make these extremely simple. So here, instead of Python or anything complex, I just have a simple dropdown. And this will essentially trigger based on this condition. Next, we'll add our tabular data. For the first table, I'm going to want to get product quantity in unit price. And you'll see as we go here, I'm not doing any mapping with the document. I'm just typing in questions or prompts, and this is how we're going to do extraction. Okay, so we have two tables here created. We also have our form fields designated. The last thing we need to do is incorporate vision into this so that we can extract these tables successfully. So what I'm going to do is just simply add this simple tag here, Gen AI Vision. And this essentially tells document automation to use vision as opposed to text to turn on the vision-based extraction. Okay. Lastly, we have covered our generative AI vision aspect, the ability to extract multiple tables, and then we also have a field rule here, which will basically say, whenever this is not empty, it'll give a warning and it'll also flag this for validation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create that model. And to run documents against this, or one of the ways we can do it, is I could just click process where I want to download the data and then select the input document, which is this sample legal contract here. As soon as I click process, you'll see the bot agent kick off. Now, since I'm running it in developer mode on my device, this will run locally. In production, this would typically run on an unattended machine. Now, I also mentioned that workflow. So let's see what's happening exactly behind the scenes as this is processing. If I go to view the status, I'll be taken to the automation copilot, which I'm accessing natively in the control room, but later we'll see how we can access this from other enterprise systems. In the automation copilot, I could see a chain of events. We started with a form. We didn't see this form because it was kind of behind the scenes. I just clicked process. But what's happening is within Copilot, there's a understanding of what learning instance we need to call, what's the document, the name, as well as the output folder. This is then given to an extraction bot, which is going to run and actually extract data from the page. So if you think about that workflow we looked at in the slides, classification, pre-processing, things of that nature, all of those would occur before we hit this extraction step. Now, how exactly would we configure that in the control room? Remember when we talked a little bit about things being automatically created for us? If I go into my control room and my private tab here and click refresh, you could see just a minute ago, all of these assets were created for us behind the scenes. Anytime I click create learning instance and document automation, it automatically creates a process, the forms, and all of these subbots. If we look at this process, this is what is happening within document automation natively. Now, there's a lot here, but essentially what we're trying to do is extract data right here within the extraction bot. This is what is running currently. And then based off that extraction, go to the necessary step. If it has a warning or error or can't find any information, we go to a validation step, which we'll see in just a second. Or if there's no errors, it goes down this path and downloads the data either as a CSV or as a JSON. And then if it failed for any reason, it goes down this path. Now, the point here is not necessarily to cover all of these different pieces in detail, but to just show you the workflow behind the scenes, how easy it would be to customize. I can drag in a bot here before extraction if I need to do any classification or pre-processing or anything of that nature. And then when it gets done and downloads that structured information, I could do the same thing. I can drag in API calls, other approval steps. This is completely customizable, and the end user will interact with this from the automation copilot, which is going to be this experience here. The model we just created has now completed the extraction step. We can see that it has a validation status and has brought us to this interface. From a end user perspective, if I'm in the business, this is really where I would kind of spend any time extracting information. Now it did find the delivery address, but since we added that rule, it's telling me to please double check this value. If I look at the delivery address within this text here, we can still see it's 456 Industrial Drive in Austin, Texas. It was extracted correctly. We also have the date here, February 17th, 2025. And then we have both tables successfully extracted as well. Now, the kind of crazy thing about document automation is it had never seen this document before, right? There was no template training. We didn't do any mapping of tables or mapping of values. We created some fields. The prompts for those fields were automatically generated for us. And then we created our learning instance and processed a document. The time to value within the solution is pretty immeasurable. And that's why earlier I mentioned it's a lot about the how as opposed to the what. You can build, complex Python code and do extraction of data from documents. But the time it takes to do that, the time it takes to maintain it, the human interface to validate it is probably going to be a little bit tricky, right? Whereas with document automation, you have all of these steps you need to do before, after, as well as a robust middle capability from an extraction perspective provided within one platform. If I go ahead here and click submit, it will extract that data in a structured format. In this example, I am choosing to download it to a CSV, and then I can have an automation go ahead and pick up that information and route it to whichever respective system that it would need to go. We can see that new CSV generated right here. If I go ahead and open it up, it will have all of the data that we just saw extracted in that validation view. I see there's a couple questions in the chat. While this Excel is loading, I'll go ahead and answer some of these. So can you please explain the reasoning behind including GenAI Vision in one of the field prompts? That is to tell it to use vision model for that field, or whether it's a table field or a form field. You don't necessarily want to turn vision on for every single field just because using vision will increase the runtime. So we wanted to give customers granularity to say, hey, this field's a little bit trickier to find, or this table's a little bit trickier to find. Use vision for this one, but use maybe text-based generative extraction for another one. So it really saves runtime, and you just add the tag to whichever prompt at the end that you want to have vision used for. The other question, can you repeat the tag needed to be included on the prompt in order to use vision? Yes, so that will be at GenAI Vision. And I'll actually show you the documentation on that in just a second briefly, and I'll put that into the chat as well. Document automation can extract image-based PDFs, so it's not limited to just .pdf. It can extract images as well, or image-based PDFs. And then the last question is, does it need to run a validation click submit to create the CSV, or can it run in unattended mode? So it can run in unattended mode. I usually use validation for demo purposes. Otherwise, you kind of won't be able to see the validation view. It's just easier to demonstrate and present from that perspective, but it actually absolutely can run unattended. Once it is done running, this is the output. Again, it could be a JSON as well. And the other thing I'll note here after I close this, if I go over to our docs portal, like I said, all of this is GA today, and I will put this link into the chat currently. But this gives you all of the tags. So Gen AI Vision, the description, the example prompt, and there's actually some other tabs which we'll cover in the latter part of the demonstration in just a second. But everything is here in the link that I just posted in the chat.
There's a question in the chat, Ben, that
Yes.
is there any built-in analytics capabilities on top of the extracted data?
Yes, so there is the ability to do analytics capabilities on top of the extracted data. You can tag variables within Copilot and report against them, and then you could also use a bot to kind of go over that extracted data for more custom analytics as well.
And there's another question. Can we have a multimodal document extraction from this? Like if I have multi-page documents with complex tables, embedded images, picture, and charts, can it perform the image analysis as well?
Yeah, so that is a good question. So document automation can extract values from a document using generative AI, whether it's vision or text-based extraction. So you can extract information from a multi-page document that has complex tables. If there's embedded images with text on those images that you want to extract, it can do that as well. Where it gets a little tricky is charts. Charts are kind of the cutting edge of generative AI. I think there's been some models within the last month or 2 months that have shown some better capabilities of chart interpretation and extraction. But I would say, just kind of broadly, it is a use case that should be feasible and worth exploring. It would just kind of depend on the fine print of the use case, if you will, and some of the lower level details.
So there's a follow-up question of this. How can we specify if we need to extract a specific table from from specific page out of a big contract documents if the same table is repeated on different pages?
Yep. So I'll cover that in one of the next examples because we'll see kind of a little bit more of what prompt capabilities we have in terms of using more complex prompts to extract data from different types of documents. For the first example, we just saw a couple basic prompts, but with prompt engineering and some iterations, you can make those very specific, indicating specific sections, areas, things of that nature to get data from.
Okay, great. There's a few more
Okay.
questions in the Q&A if you want to, I don't know if you want to address those or if you want to move forward and
Yep.
then.
I'll show a couple other examples. Just had a few more to walk through, and then probably in about 10 minutes or so, I'll just kind of go through all the questions. So some of them may be answered as well in the next section, because we'll see a little bit more complex examples, and then I'll kind of circle back to some of these. So I got a running list on the other monitor, if you will, and I will try to tackle as many as possible after we go through some of the other examples. So jumping over into Copilot, I had three other examples here to walk through briefly. We won't create these learning instances from scratch together, but we will see exactly what they look like from an extraction capability perspective. Now, the first learning instance I'm going to jump into is going to be Product Club. This is going to be product document information. It is also going to be an example of very difficult tabular extraction, as well as the ability to use more sophisticated rules to ensure the integrity of the data. So here we could see the document on the left, extraction on the right. Notice I launched this from Salesforce, so this is kind of an example of dropping document automation into any system that you interact with on a daily basis. From an validation perspective, we could see it was triggered because of the total amount. There's a rule. If it's over a certain threshold, we want to validate a human just to make sure it's correct. But most importantly in this example is we have some very complex tables. You could see the columns here, your reference, order number, delivery number is kind of this first row here. And then we also need the commodity code, the country of origin, the place um, of dispatch, and then we need the material, batch, quantity, etc. If we look at this scenario, without vision, this would have been, full stop, extremely difficult, probably impossible to do this in a scaled, reliable way because it's very difficult to tell text, hey, this one really corresponds to this, and this one corresponds to this one, right? With a vision model, and as we look at this as humans, we can see, okay, there's 4 rows of data here. There's 4 rows of data here as well. Um, I can do the cognition to say this matches to this, right? So if I look at the year reference number, I could see this 410 slash 450, etc. If we look at the material number, I could see this Borstar extraction here, the batch number, which is right below it, down here, the 521017, as well as the order number, the quantity, etc. And there's some rules within this learning instance, which we'll see in just a second, that is dropping things like LB because we just wanted to focus on the actual quantity number as opposed to including any type of metric. So one, generative AI vision is able to significantly help with these complex tables that have a very messy mapping of column data to actual values. And then two, when we look at the learning instance in just a second, we're going to see really what the power is of rules as well as the power of prompting. Because if we look at the second item here, you'll notice this item, partial load surcharge, which kind of cut off there at the end, this doesn't have all of the other details of this line item. There's no place of dispatch, country of origin. This is also missing a quantity here. But if we think kind of logically about this, since these two are kind of grouped together, this partial load surcharge should inherit some of the values from above, right? Now let's jump into the learning instance and see exactly how this was made possible. If we go into Product Club here, you'll note firstly, we have one filled rule. So this is the pretty simple one. If the formula is, over $10,000, show a high amount invoice warning, right? But also more importantly, and this is one of the questions that came across, is we have a lot of capabilities from a prompting perspective. So if we think about that second row with the partial surcharge line item that didn't have a lot of other materials, right? I can ask a prompt that says, what is the quantity? But in this scenario, example, if you see a partial load surcharge, if it's blank, fill in the quantity in the remaining fields as you would for the corresponding materials. Partial load surcharge doesn't have a quantity because it's based on the quantity of the delivered item. So fill out the quantity using the corresponding amounts of the material. So I'm able to give text to the generative AI model. I'm also able to use vision. So it's like training this artificial intelligence to look at it just like a human, have the business context just like a human would, so that they could recognize these scenarios when a certain line item doesn't have a required field, use that context to be able to pull that information still out of that document. And again, any rules you want can ensure integrity on top of all of this to make sure that everything is, governed and no system of record is going to be updated with bad data, right? The other rule here from a data standardization perspective, especially if you're dealing with metrics or different countries and currencies, things of that nature, dropping, reformatting metric units. In this case, it was pounds, but it could also very well be currency. And then the last thing here, which I think is really, really innovative, and this was, I believe, released with the .35 release as well, is in addition to doing conditions with text, so if this is not empty, if the text contains this value, do something, we can also do formulaic based validation. So In a table, if every row has quantity, unit price, and total price, I should be able to validate that because if the quantity times the unit price, um, doesn't equal the total price, that should trigger a warning for me. So what I'm able to do is I'm able to say a formula that says, the total price should equal the division of quantity times unit price times the price basis. And if it does not equal that, show a warning, right? Same thing with the total sum of the invoice. If I tally up everything in the column, so in the table, if I tally everything up to equal the total amount of the entire document, so I go row by row, tally up the total price for each row, that should be equal to the total amount. If it's not, then basically show a warning and notify the individual. So not only is there more text-based rules you could do, but you could also do rules that involve formulas and involve extracted data from the document itself. So checking the integrity of the tabular extraction, comparing that against total prices, all of that is available today in GA. This is the link to the documentation. I'll post this one into the chat as well. Just so you could see all of the different operators, logical commands that you can do to validate data within document automation. And it's all kind of formulaic based, so it's kind of like you're writing checks in Excel, right? There's no Python or anything of that nature involved. I know there's a lot of questions. I'll cover the next two examples very briefly, and then we can have a Q&A. So the other table example is an explanation of benefits here. And if you think about how healthcare benefits statements from, Aetna, Blue Cross, there's a lot of complexity in these documents. Now, this example here is not necessarily so much about how complex this table is or how we're able to pull data from this table. This example is more so about how do we build traceability from a header or parent information of a table to all of the rows. What I mean by that is if we look at these claims, and I zoom in a little bit to make this a bit more legible, we could see a table down here, but we could also see some information and metadata at the top. I could see the claim ID, I could see when the claim was received, and I could see the provider. Now, based on my understanding of this document as a business individual, I know that these three data points need to be adjacent for all of the rows of data. I need to have traceability between this parent information here and the information contained in the table. Because some of these are, claim EPFD from Palo Alto Medical Foundation. If I go and navigate to another one, down here, you'll see a completely different claim ID, a different date, and a different provider. So what we're able to do is use what are called linking tags, which essentially links some form-filled information that is stored within the header of a table to all of the subsequent rows. So if I look at the extraction over here on the right, I could see those linked fields here, the first three columns, which are pretty much the same. And then I could see the dynamic values of all the rows, which map to, amount billed, member rate, what the service type was, etc. For post-processing, this level of traceability has been very important for our customers. This was another request that we received, and we wanted to innovate into the platform because it makes it a lot easier when you have the full story and there's no data missing when you have the traceability from these two aspects. If we look briefly at that learning instance over here, I will go to the explanation of benefits. The key tags, and these are in the documentation I sent earlier, is this linked field. That basically tells me this field should cascade down the document for all of the subsequent rows. So I can see the received on date, the claim ID, and the provider all have linked fields, and then the rest of the data is dynamic. Now for the very last example, before we cut back into the slides and have Q&A, is a very quick one to demo, but I know it's a very important one because I get this request from customers very frequently when I demo document automation, is how do you handle signature detection? How do you tell which checkbox is selected? And also, I know there's a question in the chat around handwriting as well. all three of those. So this one covers two of the three. What type of absence is requested? Absence type here is vacation, and is there a signature? This used to be very hard with generative AI text extraction, but with vision, since we could look at this with, essentially cognitive eyes in a machine, we're able to tell very easily what the checkbox is, as well as is there a signature on the document. The prompts for this are very simple, but we are using that Gen AI vision tag to use the vision model to do this extraction. Um, Handwriting is also a lot improved now with generative AI vision as well, because it's easier to kind of look at that visually as opposed to try to transcribe that into text and then extract the text. So with that, I'll just jump back into this slide and we can get into just two quick slides and then Q&A. Just wanted to kind of recap before we get to Q&A on what we saw. And again, the what is extremely impressive, being able to extract these very complex tables with messy column names and messy values, signatures, checkboxes, linked fields, all of that is extremely robust from a what perspective and what the product can do, but also I think from a how perspective, being able to just write sentences. Yes, some prompt engineering at times would be warranted for more complex use cases, but essentially shifting from a lot of manual training, being able to create a model in minutes that it has never seen a document, successfully extract the information, um, and also just provide it out of the box. I think the intuitive and easiness to use of it is quite phenomenal. The other thing is the consistent user interface. So today we saw it in Salesforce as well as the control room. That experience can drop into virtually anything. And then lastly, the holisticness of it as a solution, pre-processing, post-processing, classification, splitting, all of that within one platform. So Jamie, I'll pass it over to you, and then we can get into a Q&A.
Great, thanks, Ben. So I just wanted to let everybody know that our upcoming Imagine Orlando registration is open for it in May. This is going to be a very unique and immersive experience as we are hosting the event this year at the Conrad in Orlando, and we are completely taking over the resort. And so it will be like I said, a very immersive experience, and it's going to be something like we've never had before. I'm really excited about the program, but scan the QR code. Like I said, registration's open. There's some videos of what the site's going to look like. So it's going to be a really great experience to get forward-looking information about what we're going to be coming out with for the upcoming year. And it's also going to be a great place to get some hands-on engagement with the product, as well as, of course, face-to-face time with our experts like Ben.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamie. And I'll start going through the Q&A. I see there's about 9 questions, and we have some ample time, so we're gonna start going one by one. So Joe had a question around, does using vision on the first field of the table help the automation find the rest of the data? Or is it just really helpful for the tagged field? So good question. And actually, if you look at the details in our first release, we made it so that if you use generative AI on one field in a table, it applies the generative AI vision to that entire table. So if I use Gen AI vision on field, product in a table, I don't have to specify it for the other fields at the table. It will use it for all of them. Now, if I'm doing it on the form field side, so not table, just the fields on the form, I would use Gen AI vision one by one. Otherwise, it would not apply to those other fields. So good question, and that's also covered a bit in the documentation as well. So does the license of document automation include Gen AI and ChatGPT tokens as well? What does the document automation license come with? So it does include it. So there is no, essentially, I think the main kind of takeaway is you do not have to pay additional tokens to OpenAI or Anthropic. The generative AI models that are used are essentially out of the box with document automation. So And the sizing of that, you can determine with your aligned account team, but essentially you're not going to have to, pay Automation Anywhere for document automation licenses and then go pay, token consumptions for every time you run the model. Good question. So can you show us an example of enhanced pre-processing discussed in the deck before? Today, we won't have time to cover that, but in the control room, there are pre-processing packages. There's also demos likely out there on YouTube and other platforms. But if you do have control room access and you open up any taskbot and look for pre-processing, you will see the packages. Feel free to try them out. You can use them to do date conversions, clean up resolutions, things of that nature as well. Can we give a prompt at table level to assist in identifying tables that are similar looking? Not yet. There is not a table level prompt, but there is the ability to use a tag to specify a table. So there's not a table level prompt that is coming, but there is this table identifier tag. So just like we use the GenAI Vision tag, we can use this at table identifier and insert a table title. So if you're looking for different tables and those tables have different titles, even if they have similar columns, you could use this identifier to delineate between them so that you extract the correct information from it. Good question. Okay, moving on to the next. So is the prompt a layman language? So yes, it is pretty much in layman's terms. They can be very simple, like what is the product? That was the prompt that we built in the first learning instance we did together. That was successful. But as you saw in the other example, they can also get very more sophisticated. You could also do things like, instead of giving me the raw value of the field, give me an array of values or give me it in a JSON format. You have a lot of flexibility with the prompting. It's not always required you have sophisticated prompts, but you can use them to whatever the needs are of the use case. So prompt engineering is definitely, a plus if the use case is very complex. Okay, what about the security of data? Does data get exposed to the cloud? So no, it doesn't. We have a lot of architecture on our documentation portal, but essentially it's a stateless call, and it is within a controlled environment. So nothing is, remembered. No data is training, models publicly or anything of that nature. Can we extract fields from handwriting? Yes, you can. It is still definitely an area that is improving. From my experience, I've found Google Vision to be a better OCR engine for handwriting than Abby. That's just kind of from the tests that I've done. Their Vision also helps the handwriting aspect as well, but I will say, like, handwriting is definitely not at a place where you're going to have an extremely high pass-through rate. But I do believe that the business process, even if handwriting is in scope, could be significantly benefited given the other aspects of processing, especially given that you have that validation experience as well. So when you have handwriting in scope, I would say kind of proceed with caution, use validation rules to trigger a human in the loop process, and kind of use that and test things as you go, as you get more comfortable with the solution. Can we use the linked field tag without using the vision tag? Yes, you absolutely can. You could use any of those tags independently, linked field, GenAI Vision, or table identifier tag, or you could use them jointly, but they are not dependent on one another. Does it make cost incremental for using vision tag for each field filed or not? No, it does not impact the cost. It does impact runtime to some degree, but there is not a cost ramification to that. How to handle if first column data is available in two columns. So I would say it would kind of depend on the document. So if you're wanting to get data from a document and you have two columns um, of data, and you only want to get data from the first column. My first question would be, is data always in that first column? And then the second question would be, is there any delineation between the data? Is there any way to look at the data set intelligently and, say use this column over this column? Essentially, the rule of thumb that I usually go back to with these technologies is if you're looking at it as a human, what's your thought process? How do you know that it's the first column versus the second column? Is it the first column every time? If so, that's pretty easy. You could just train the model to, pick up the first column and ignore the second. But if there's dynamic elements to it, then that's kind of where the human cognition comes into play. And I would just try to map that human cognition to the generative, AI components. Which vision models can get integrated? Currently, we support um, Open AI as well as Anthropic. The other thing to note is you can integrate your own models into these processes. So we do have a bring your own model or bring your own key process. Now that would require you to set up things on, that hyperscaler's platform. But if you're using the out of the box easy ones that you can kind of just get up and running with, you can use Anthropic or the Open AI model. And I see the question right below that was very similar, so I'll mark that one off as well. Um, can document automation be integrated with an on-prem server? So yes, you can leverage document automation if you're on-prem or if you're in the cloud, and regardless of your deployment, the bot runners will process locally. One update on that, we do have capabilities coming soon for cloud-based extraction. So instead of processing locally, you can have the option to do kind of server-side processing. So that is an innovation that is coming. Are languages supported by GenAI Vision the same languages supported by the underlying LLM? No. So the language designation would be handled on the document automation side. So when you create a learning instance, you can designate which languages you want to support. There is a long list of those languages, and that's also on the documentation portal as well. Okay. And then I see a question around the unit pricing of the GenAI services. So those services are included in the document automation solution. So any of the account team members or people on the sales side can work with you on that pricing depending on the use case and the deployment of it. And then from a HIPAA and compliance perspective, we do have a lot of reports on our documentation portal as well as architecture diagrams. Usually before any deployment of this, we typically have one or several meetings with IT security and InfoSec teams. So I would explore some of the information on the documentation portal. And then also, typically we're happy to have those conversations as well and address any of the security concerns. Okay, how can we attain greater accuracy when getting different PDFs and templates? So that's the one great thing about document automation. It's kind of template agnostic. So it doesn't matter which template you're receiving, since we're using prompts as opposed to, coordinates on a page or layout training, it should be very accurate across a diverse set of templates. Known challenges being worked on by the AA tech team. So there's a couple things in the pipeline. So cloud-based extraction is a big one. Intelligent document processing operations is another big area that we're exploring. So if you think about DevOps, machine learning ops, like ops and optimization is a big thing. So kind of envision a world in which you could, pass a platform, past document automation, 5 documents that you receive. It automatically creates the learning instances. It automatically creates sample documents for unit testing. And then you kind of have an integrated pipeline chain of events. So ops is another piece, expanding upon the rules, expanding upon the capabilities of vision. Everything generative AI is another huge focus for the team. So those are kind of the big focus areas right now, if you will. There's also a workplace coming soon to make the development of loaded instances a bit more seamless, version control, things of that nature. So those are all kind of initiatives that the product team is taking on. Um, Limit to number of pages document can have, not to my knowledge, there is no limit, and all the languages are on the documentation portal. Uh, Generative AI and vision is available on premise. And can the data processor be AWS or Google when specifying OpenAI or Anthropic? We can't use OpenAI or Anthropic. So yes, in that case, you would be able to bring your own key. There's documentation on that as well in our portal. But essentially, you would bring your own key, integrate your model into document automation, and then everything processed would go to your model as opposed to the OpenAI or Anthropic one that we provide. And I believe that is all of the questions.
Well done,
Yeah.
Ben. That was a lot of questions. We are a little over time. So
Yeah.
I do want to thank everyone for joining us today and for all of your wonderful questions. Ben, as always, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and helping everybody understand the full capabilities of document automation. So thanks again, everyone, for attending. We hope to see you on a future event. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care, everyone.